adoption, ordinance to amend Section 138 to add a section of zoning of the Code of Ordinances, Rochester Hills, County, Michigan, to regulate oil and gas wells, repeal conflicting or inconsistent ordinances, prescribe penalty for violations. And as well, acceptance for second reading and adoption, ordinance to add new Article 6, pipelines, to Chapter 94 to regulate the construction and permitting of pipelines in the city, repeal conflicting or inconsistent ordinances, and prescribe a penalty for violations. So with that, again, we'll take them both at the same time. If anyone has comments to both, they're free to make comments on both of them. And with that, Mr. Ansick.
Thank you, President Hooper. Evening, Council. Mr. Mayor Burnett. Of course, we heard this for the first reading a month ago, and several changes were recommended by the City Council. I think probably best that I defer to Mr. Starren to discuss those changes, as he did make those in the ordinance.
All right. I'm not sure how much detail council would like me to go into, but I did submit revised drafts of the ordinances, in which I believe I incorporated all of the changes requested and directed by the City Council at your last meeting when this was considered, both to the oil and gas zoning ordinance amendment as well as to the proposed pipeline amendment. I'd be happy to address or comment upon any particular provisions that council would like.
Any initial comments, discussion items before we take public comment? Okay, seeing none. With that, we will take public comment at this time. I guess, again, address any questions to myself, and we will attempt to get them answered at the conclusion of public comment. First up, in no particular order, Lorraine McGoldrick.
I was surprised to see it as a second reading. It should have been a first reading. I guess more and more I'm not agreeing with our city attorney in the decisions and things that he is producing. With all due respect, I can read, and this is not like other city ordinances, as it's been claimed. Remove the weasel words. Keep it to a standard. Increase the transparency in this process. It's very disappointing to see that these standards are reduced. Transparency and community engagement has not been part of this process.
Okay, next up, Lee Zendel.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor. Government at any level is best when it uses facts, reason, and logic, not emotions, to come to decisions. With that in mind, I have a few questions about the ordinance. Paragraph 3 says the owner-operator shall install at least one groundwater monitoring well. Is that well in addition to the 3 groundwater monitoring wells that the MDEQ requires? If it's an addition to the 3, then I believe a proponent of that additional well must provide facts as to why the 3 state-mandated wells are inadequate, and just why one more well will solve the problem. If it is not an additional well, then there's no reason to have it in the ordinance at all. You propose that samples should be tested monthly because the oil companies, they make lots of money. Where are your facts as to why the MDEQ water testing intervals are inadequate? Facts, not emotions, please. The first fact must be the number of oil wells in Michigan that either during the drilling and/or operation contaminated an aquifer. If the answer for, say, the last 25 years is 0, then justify the monthly analysis. Remember, the question is the well, not any accidental surface spills. In my opinion, starting with the owner-operator shall and ending with the word xylene should all be deleted from paragraph 3 of the ordinance. These sentences are what the MDEQ already does. To keep them in, among other things, is to say that the MDEQ is failing to do their job and the city needs to duplicate the process. What facts do you have to support that contention? The final sentence, the owner-operator shall provide the results of the sample analysis, etc. The question here is, assuming no separate city well, is does the testing laboratory furnish the results directly to MDEQ? What are the facts? If direct to MDEQ, the testing laboratory could just CC the results to the city engineer. The city engineer could then just neatly file the report away because the MDEQ has the same report and, more importantly, the power to force any required action. Next, in paragraph 16AE, availability of equipment, tools, and material as necessary at the scene of an emergency. Yet paragraph 11 states that machinery and equipment not being used in the operation of the well shall not be stored or kept at the well site. The owner-operator, obeying paragraph 11, must answer paragraph 16AE as no availability due to paragraph 11 of the ordinance. That part of the ordinance contradicts itself. Next is paragraph 16B. First of all, there is no city 911 system. For your information, all 911 calls emanating in this city and many other Oakland County cities go directly to Oakland County Dispatch Center. This section, in essence, says the Oakland County Dispatch Center does not know what questions to ask, nor the owner-operator know the answers he needs to know when he calls 911. It's an insult to both parties, and only this city knows what questions to ask and answer. Get the facts and clean up the language of this ordinance. Too much of this ordinance just duplicates what MDEQ already requires. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, Jay Arnold.
Good evening. I find it disheartening and disappointing we are here tonight to watch an adoption of this ordinance. To say you let us down as our elected leaders is an understatement. I always learn not to take things personal, especially in politics. When you make decisions that will affect the quality of our life, our property values, parks, raising our kids, how can one not take this personal? Last time, Mr. Hooper, you talked about values going up because of the village of Rochester Hills. That's offensive. Bringing up values in our homes, and the oil drilling may or may not do that. You say you can't prove it one way or another. I'm not sure what you're basing your opinion on. Can you provide examples of such a dirty natural resource that doesn't have a great safety record of it increasing home values in Michigan? But then again, I believe in facts and science. When something happens, when, not if, I actually will be sad to come up here and say, told you so. I urge my fellow residents tonight, watch how our council votes. If you disagree with their vote, vote them out of office. Either this November or whenever their term is up. Set reminders on your phones for the next couple of years so you don't miss an election day. If transparency on this was as good as it was in the CAFR report and our finances, we wouldn't have this issue.
Okay, next up, Mike Powers.
So I've been coming here for about the last year on the topic of oil and gas. To continue to preserve and enhance the rights of our residents. That's a statement. To continue to preserve and enhance the rights of our residents. We've already had a couple of people come up and talk about the lack of transparency on this issue, the lack of fair notice to community members, residents, most of them who own homes and pay taxes. This to continue to preserve and enhance the rights of our residents is a promise made by Vice President and Council Member at Large, Mr. Tisdale, as he runs for re-election. Keep that in mind. He's continuing to preserve and enhance the rights of our residents. I don't believe you. Not from the way you particularly, but the rest of you have conducted yourselves on this issue is incredible. I've been a frontline guy in my entire life, my entire career. If I treated customers the way you guys treat customers on an issue like this, I'd be fired. I'd be totally fired. I think that if we look at oil and supply demand, the world is awash in oil. This way of drilling for oil is kind of new. You're going to be looking at issues out into the future. We're the past. We're the past, and the future is going to be dealt with by some of the younger people that have shown up. One of the people that showed up last week was a young lady, or 2 weeks ago, who talked about dirty technology and stuff like that. I think Rochester Hills ought to try and make a case for being known as somebody that brings in new technologies like wind power and solar power and those kinds of things. If we were needing oil, it would be a totally different deal, but we don't need it. The storage tanks are overflowing, and for us to screw around with this kind of technology in a bedroom community, and you guys going for it, and keeping it kind of under wraps, and giving notice of ordinances so late so people can't really study them and give you a good case back, and just a few people, is unconscionable. That's all I got.
Mary Ann Rising?
Thank you. My name is Mary Ann Rising, and I live at 864 Greenview Court, Rochester Hills. And thank you for the opportunity to say something, because I've been coming here on and off for about a year now, so I didn't want to miss my opportunity. My husband and I had moved back to Rochester Hills almost 3 years ago after living in the city of Flint for 14 years. Needless to say, we were thrilled when we found our perfect home near Livernois and Tinkin, within walking distance of the Paint Creek Trail. Little did we know at the time the storm we were walking into, having moved back here. The list of wants for our new home and community did not include oil, gas, or horizontal drilling. In fact, I doubt that you can find anyone in this community who would have had those three things on their list of wants when they were planning on moving here. Unfortunately, now, it could be a reason for someone not living here if we don't do as much as we possibly can to protect our community now. During our time in Flint, our home was broken into 4 times and robbed. However, what was taken from us then is no comparison to what has been taken from us and others in this community by your decision to sign oil and gas leases on public parks and a cemetery without a void, and thereby welcoming with open arms exploration for oil and gas in this community. Here, there is a loss of trust in our mayor, our city council, to do what is best for the people they represent and for the environment in which we live. I ask you, what kind of value do you place on that? I only pray that you now stand up to the plate and have the guts to do what is right, and as much as you can to keep Rochester Hills safe, because of the potential long-term risk to our lives, our environment, and our property values far outweigh any short-term gain. Thank you.
Todd Freericks?
Thank you for letting me comment. This is my first meeting. I've never been here before. I've been to township meetings such as this for property value, things like that, but unrelated. But you guys welcome us. You guys let us comment. That's great. As a resident of Rochester Hills, I'm really, really disappointed in what I've seen. Many, many months of this, many residents being opposed to the decisions that are being made by you guys about oil and gas. I haven't heard one positive thing. I haven't heard one resident say, I want oil and gas in my community. I don't understand why you guys, as elected officials, aren't bending over backwards to make the residents happy. Look, residents, this is what we did. Is this okay? Is this, you're just like, boom, right on through. I don't get it. You guys are elected officials. Do what, as officials, we're electing you to do. Another resident once told me, nothing about this is going to make this a better place to live for my family. Nothing. I'm asking all of you as elected officials to do what we are asking you to do. Vote what we want. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Philip Barker?
Hi, good evening. I have 4 points that I want to bring out tonight on the ordinances. The first is on the oil and gas drilling. Section pertains to section 138-4.425, number 2. And I'd like to see you have a place a period after the word park in the first sentence. So the qualifier, unless the adjoining property is pooled with the well site property, can be interpreted to render the preceding 1,000-foot setback irrelevant. So that language is too loose. So I have a question as far as what do you mean by unless the adjoining property is pooled with the well site property? So that is a question to be answered. And are you referring to if properties are pooled by the DEQ into a drilling unit is the second question. So there's some clarity that's needed there. Or is it some sort of other pooling that you're talking about? So either way, the language needs to be revised to make the intent, the 1,000-foot setback, crystal clear. Because if you don't have that clarity, you're opening the door to litigation in the future from the city's point of view, and also from the residents' point of view for a protection point of view for the residents, because you'll be placing the wells closer to the residency if you allow that, if you don't put that period in there. Second point I have is the well ordinance needs to require bonding by the drilling company, just like the pipeline ordinance has. There's many things that can go wrong during a drilling and testing phase of the well installation and establishment, and this is all prior to the pipelines being put in place. And the city should be proactive in protecting itself and those around the well by requiring the bond as a condition to the well approval and placement. You've probably seen in the news there's been a lot of lightning storms in the southwest, and when a lightning hits a well site, it has potential for explosions. So you want to make sure that some bonding's in place for that. Unless the loophole in section 138-4.425, number 2, unless that loophole with that period is put in place, as I discussed, I would recommend that the ordinance not be approved. The reason that you're leaving the door wide open to zoning, to opening up to no zoning restrictions on that. The fourth point I have is on the pipeline ordinances regarding section 94-202, section C. The pipeline operator shall equip all city-regulated pipelines with an automated pressure monitoring system that detects leaks and shuts off any line or section of the line that develops a leak. So the question here would be, what determines a leak? So is there a quantity of fluids, a quantity of gas? What measurement are you using to shut that, to have that valve shut off? As a case in point, just over the weekend, I was reading from the LA Times that they monitored 1,000 miles of streets in 3 communities in the LA basin, 3 cities, and they found 250 methane leaks just in 1,000 miles of city streets, and that's like 1 leak per every 4 miles. So what method is the city using to monitor methane leaks from the pipelines that are already in place and also the new ones that will be put in place? Okay. That completes my comments tonight. Thank you.
Scott Beaton?
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. Every time I come down on this microphone and keep dating myself, trust me, I don't feel that old. I've been coming to City Council meetings for about 30 years, stuck on Rochester Road. A week ago, Patty and I were trying to do the math. I think I've driven a car on Rochester Road 23,000 times. You know, that's ridiculous. Stuck in traffic 23,000 times on Rochester Road and Rochester Hills. So I guess I've been around the block a couple times. And my point is, I'm trying to bring up Lorraine's point. As a former president of the Rochester Hills City Council, I don't ever remember a council not having a first reading of an ordinance before they jumped into the second reading. I mean, if you really go back and look at every single page of minutes, I don't think there's ever been once that council has not passed a first reading first and then waited a couple weeks and came back a second reading. So I'm slightly confused here this evening. This is already up for a second reading, and we haven't had a first reading. And a former president to a president, President Hooper, I think we should stick to tradition and make sure this evening tonight is the first reading and we come back for a second reading. Thank you.
Aaron Howlett?
Good evening, Council, Mayor. So I am back to a comment on the oil and gas ordinances. And yeah, I too was confused, and I too was at all these meetings. There was no vote to accept a first reading last time. You all said we're going to add some amendments and get it posted. It was posted Wednesday. It was dated May 7th. So why you sat on it for a week to compress our response time? I don't know. But I'm officially making a point here. It's not a second reading. Okay. So I just want to say that I'm not completely sure that all of you understand. I know some of the attorneys up here understand that when we pass the ordinances, the moratorium goes away. So you really need to know what you're approving, and all of your names are going to be attached to it, okay? Life of a well can be 10, 20, 30 years, okay? So you gotta own it. You gotta feel it in your bones that you are 120% sure of what you're signing off on. Because if you don't, you're gonna be, so let's say, Dale, I'm not picking on you, I know you're new. Dale's in the Kroger line, mom's standing behind him, baby on the hip, year or two now. Mr. Hedrick, I got a rig next to my subdivision. What happened? Mr. Anzic's map that guaranteed us that there's no possibility in the history of the universe that there's anything residential. By the way, that's not an MDEQ map like it's labeled on the city website. That's from the City Planning Commission. But you have to think of those. If you plan on living here, you got to really feel it, people, because you own it. You guys rushed into signing a lease before you even seriously considered ordinances, right? Yeah, so you own this, folks. So, and the only person that's really supported us with a set of big boy pants is the one little lady over here, okay? So we better saddle up, gentlemen. Let's get our big boy pants on. And you got to own this, seriously, okay? This is not a second reading. So no deal is better than a bad deal, because moratorium goes bye-bye. We got 3 months left, okay? No reason to rush it. You had 2.5 years to get this right. We have every reasonable expectation that you've had time to get this straight. We've gone to Lansing. We've sat with the regulators. We've talked to our state legislator, read all the stuff. We've offered many times, let's get some collaborative, citizen committee as you do on other issues. There is no reason to exclude us in this process, especially when we have a community of lawyers and people with expertise that can help you. I don't know what else we can do except for beg. No deal, folks, is better than a bad deal. You own this. All of your names are going to be on it. Thank you.
Pablo Fraccaroli.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So this past weekend, I received notice from the city that this item was going to be on the agenda. And because, unfortunately, I didn't open up the mail on Saturday, I ended up opening up on Sunday, I effectively received 24 hours notice for this meeting. I would have liked to have had time to read the draft and prepare myself for this meeting, like Mr. Zendel has done. Unfortunately, I got a full-time job, and I didn't have time to do that on Monday. So 24 hours notice is not enough. So can you please explain to me why the notice will be mailed out just days before the meeting? Thank you.
Jim Stevens, looks like Troy, Michigan.
How you folks all doing? Residents of Rochester Hills, I greet you all here tonight. As you may or may not know, I am current candidate for mayor.
We're not doing politicking here. That's not the purpose of it.
Excuse me, sir. When I'm done talking, you can
No,
comment.
I run the meeting, not you, and we do not do politics here in Rochester
sorry.
Hills.
So, I have a simple solution to the controversy of oil drilling in Rochester Hills. As you all know, city officials voted to lease the property to Jordan Development. It seems obvious the majority of residents do not favor oil drilling anywhere in our city, right? I'm a long-term resident here over 27 years. As of last Friday, I spoke with Ben Bauer of Jordan Development. We talked about the residents' disgust, dismay, and my own personal feelings. I talked to him about consider selling the lease back to the city of Rochester Hills. And he said that he may consider that. And I said, as future mayor, I will offer additional $10,000 of my own money to purchase this lease back because I don't want oil drilling in the city of Rochester Hills. As a result of the court's failure to respond to the residents' rights and opinions, in my own opinion, the judge basically said the courtroom was not the proper forum for resolution, but the voting booth is. This November, you can decide for change. I stand here.
We do not do politics. I already warned you once. Have a seat.
I stand here
I've already warned you once. You're out of order.
Excuse
We
me,
do
sir.
not do politics here in Rochester Hills. It's not the purpose of city
Have
council
you ever
meeting.
been to Afghanistan?
Sir, you're out of order. Have a seat.
I want to thank you all for your support.
That's it. We're taking a 10-minute recess. Please shut the mics off like that. We're taking a 10-minute recess.
And for